Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's rise and welcome our leaders, the people who are going to speak to us this afternoon. Let's all rise, please.
Colleagues, is the Lord Mayor, His Worship,
Nasaka, Lady Nasaka. The case of His Worship, Sulaiman Chidanga, is quite intriguing, for it was the spark that ignited a cacophony that would characterize all the subsequent boisterous council meetings hitherto chaired by the Lord Mayor, who doubled as the Speaker. The NRM councillors, who had a strong numerical strength with 20 out of 30 members, claimed as of right that the Deputy Lord Mayor should be designated by their party and imposed on me. To date, I am yet to recover from the shock I suffered shortly after assuming office as the Lord Mayor in May 2011, when a then NRM councillor, Hajati Madina Nsereko, currently MP elect for Kawempe South, came to the office of the Lord Mayor with information that she had defeated the late Serwamba Baker in the NRM caucus primaries for the Deputy Lord Mayor's position, allegedly conducted at the State House by President Museveni himself. You can imagine you are seated here, Lord Mayor, and you are being told that there are primaries for the Deputy Lord Mayor somewhere else. The acrimony and the impasse intensified in the wake of my recalcitrance towards their maneuvers, culminating into the botched impeachment, arguably the darkest episode of my 15-year journey, which happened on Monday, 25th November 2013. I can add at exactly 9 without even a second past 9. It was exactly 9, Monday, 25th November 2013, when that botched impeachment was carried out. That deed of infamy will live to haunt me all through my life. I insist, this deed of infamy witnessed political obscenities of unparalleled magnitude in the institution of KCCA, leading to the illegal closure of the Lord Mayor's parlor for the rest of the term, with the attendant denigration of my immaturate record. The key political shenanigans that spiced up the whole melodrama which characterized that whatever scene were as follows. Number one, the present defiance of 3 High Court orders issued by the Registrar, His Worship Waninda, another one by His Worship Justice Yasin Nyanzi, and Honorable Lady Justice Lydia Mugambe, who cited and condemned the then Minister Frank Tumwebaze, the Executive Director Jennifer Semakula Musisi, Attorney General Peter Nyombi, and the Chairman of the Electoral Commission, Engineer Badi Bichigundu, who was at that time organizing a by-election in total defiance of a court order that had blocked the impeachment process. And he had set a date for a by-election. And I fight because I had been impeached and I wouldn't stand in the by-election. The brutalization and the dehumanization of my lawyers, and the process servers, together with Honorable Alan Sewanya, who attempted to serve the interim court order, that will also remain in our history here. The torture and the glaring injustice meted out against me during the Justice Bamugemerere Probe Committee proceedings and throughout the entire impeachment processes. The bizarre maneuvers to have council fully constituted by hastily and illegally conducting elections of the 4 councillors representing professional bodies, engineers, lawyers, architects, and doctors, following a Justice Zewukize order that faulted the government for failing to conduct those elections for over 3 years, and thus blocking the processing of the Bamugemerere report that had convicted me without a fully constituted council. Machinations were then engineered to have those councillors elected on 19th November 2013, illegally sworn in by Honorable Frank Tumwebaze on 21st November, and on 25th November, just 3 days later, they were sworn in. I mean, they sat to pass a resolution of impeachment. I was called to call a council to swear in those councillors so that they come and impeach me. I declined to call that council. I was particularly vexed by the uncanny conduct of the so-called professional councillors, voting me out of office. Yet the impeachment council of 25th November was their first sitting, having been elected and sworn in barely 4 days before the council sitting. And for the case of Kanduo Frank, the then councillor representing the Uganda Law Society, he had won in quotes with only 4 votes out of 5 voters who constituted the electoral college, with the then presidents of Uganda Law Society, Uganda Law Society, Ruth Sebatindira, Vice President Ernest Kalibara, and Secretary Nicholas Opio boycotting the bogus elections, while the rest of over 4,000 members of Uganda Law Society were disenfranchised by statutory instrument issued by Frank Tumwebaze, with a clause restricting voter eligibility to only the 8 committee members. Let me pause and explain this. The law provided for 4 councillors representing statutory bodies, professional bodies. They refused to conduct elections for 3 years, from 2011 to 2012. When it came to the time of impeachment, the court ruled and said, you cannot proceed, because the law talks of 2/3 of all the councillors, they had not constituted the council fully. So the Minister Frank Tumwebaze has to issue an instrument, and they conducted those elections in a hushed manner. And what happened? Mayhem, broke rules at Hotel Africana here. Only five members of the executive turned up to vote the council representing the Uganda Law Society. Only 5. And there were 2 candidates, Franka Kanduo and Harriet Magala. Franka Kanduo got 4 votes, Harriet Magala got 1. So Franka Kanduo was declared the winner with 4 votes. And he came here to vote out the Lord Mayor, who had been elected by 220,000 voters. You come with only 4 votes. Put yourself in my shoes. In respect to other professional bodies, we are not in any way different, as Miss Vena Musiganisa Mbabas, who emerged the winner for the slot of Uganda Law for the Society of Architects, polled only 7 votes out of 14. Ironically, council was by default dissolved on the same day of the botched impeachment, since I was the speaker. And the same council had refused to approve my debut. And therefore, councils could not convene till the term lapsed in May 2016. And as fate would have it, councillors for professional bodies had their maiden and last council on that day of infamy. The conduct of councillors representing professional bodies was diametrically inconsistent with the spirit of the KCC Act, since it had been hoped that they would infuse the institution of KCC or council with the professional wisdom. Consequently, the 2019 amendment to the KCC Act that stripped the Lord Mayor of the role of the Speaker and created an executive body also scrapped the 4 slots of 4 councillors representing professional bodies. We needed to have this on record so that you get to understand. At one time we had 4 councillors representing 4 professional bodies. Now they are not there. What happened? The record is there for you. And also, for you to understand the dynamics of councils, that when you don't have majority from your side, you can always get a deputy road mayor from the opposite side by force. And the situation may become worse. Another ugly episode of similar magnitude was the 10th August 2024 devastating Kitez West Side catastrophe, which claimed at least 35 lives, with many bodies still buried in the debris. Needless to mention, the tremors thereof, which got many of us bent out of shape and some purged out of the institution, those who were arrested and prosecuted, are still reverberating within and outside in the corridors. Many have not been compensated up to the present day. All in all, niggling hurdles notwithstanding, it has been such an amazing journey, full of memorable experiences, lessons, and eventful encounters, and bonding with the different stakeholders, all of you inclusive here, in all spheres of life, both domestically and internationally. And I will eternally remain grateful to the Almighty Allah for the countless blessings and the people of Kampala for the golden opportunity and the trust given to me for a record period of 15 years as their #1 city supremo. I don't take that for granted. Thank you, the Lord. Thank you, the people of Kampala. Thank you, all the stakeholders, for that wonderful opportunity accorded to me to showcase my potential, which I am sure and confident all of you can attest to. Now, I will go to the challenges. After the challenges, the rest I'll just flip through. Operating under a new and defective legislation. It is right that the KCC Act 2010 or 2011 was designed with the spirit of fixing the political dynamics of the day by eroding the influence of the elected leaders, usurp their mandate, and vest the same in the central government. Resultantly, the said instrument is not only fraught with contradictions, inconsistencies, and grey areas, but has also occasioned a terrible conundrum that has baffled all actors since inception. As an anecdote, the said law created a number of power centers with overriding mandates, fused all the hitherto self-accounting administrative units, that is the authority and the urban division councils, into one, albeit with illusory devolved functions, and emasculated the executive authority of the Lord Mayor, thereby engendering a potentially volatile and explosive political environment. Little wonder that this law has been touted by cynics and detractors as a potent weapon against my leadership, which they have rhetorically described as ceremonial led mayor. For the last 15 years, my detractors have always denigrated me as being a ceremonial led mayor. But as the term is coming to an end, they are asking me to account for what I have done. What an irony. If I've been a ceremonial led mayor for the 15 years, according to the cynics, then you ask me, what have you done? Okay, I put on the gowns. Bloated leadership, that is challenge number 2. The current bloated leadership creates significant operational inefficiencies and administrative bottlenecks, as noted herein before. The fundamentally flawed 2011 hybrid system adopted without adequate benchmarking has resulted into creation of a bloated leadership structure comprising of the already mentioned huge number of leaders in their different clusters. Besides the conflicting mandates and inherent contradictions, this extra large structure, you know, when you get XXL, actually it should be 5XL structure, imposes a huge financial burden to the institution of KCCA, with a wage bill for the 467 political leaders amounting to, which I did not put there, and for the 1,845 technical staff, excluding the 4,122 cleaners, I didn't put the amount. The staff structures in the Ministry of Kampala, I didn't put the amount. And the RCCs, the amount is not there, and their staff, as well as members of the various statutory bodies. If you compute those figures, you will see the burden the bloated structure is imposing on the people of Kampala. Much as the political leadership has been slashed by nearly 50% in the just concluded 2026 election cycle, a rational approach to a leaner and efficient model is still elusive. Okay, the councillors were cut by almost a half, but that is not enough. More is needed to rationalize the bloated leadership structure. Governance of city by presidential decrees, challenge number 3. The KCC administration has regrettably witnessed direct control and intervention by the president over the capital state's governance almost in all sectors, public transport, markets, circles, allocation of public assets, land and drainage channels, procurement processes, physical and neighborhood planning, etc. Related to this is the uncodified policy of subjecting access to charity fund by the institution of KCCA from foreign philanthropists to the presidential approval. This policy thwarted the efforts of the Office of the Lord Mayor to secure charity funds from several potential donors, including the US dollar 500,000, that is 1.8 billion, from Hilton Foundation through the New York-based Mayor's Migration Council, where I have been a founding executive member. We subsequently resolved to channel this support meant for the urban refugees and street kids through an NGO called the Makasi Foundation, where it was unfortunately misappropriated by the NGO leadership and fled the country. Questions are always posed. You read this. This gentleman called Soros is the founder of Open Society Foundation, and he started Mayor's Migration Council. I've been a body member for so many years, founding body member. And in honor of my contribution, they said they will help finance the project that I presented before them. The urban refugees who are not in camps, because the national policy is to take care of those refugees who are in camps. But those who run to the sea, who takes care of them? And the street kids who come from Karamoja. So they appreciated this and said we shall start with an initial support of 500,000 US dollars, $500,000 US, 1.80 billion. Now, getting this money, you had to go through hurdles. It was a nightmare until we learned that it has to be approved by President Nze himself. And the donors could not wait. So creatively, we navigated around the law and got Makasi, an NGO. Makasi, the money was given by Hilton through Mayor's Migration Council. The moment 1.8 billion landed on their account, they closed the organization, closed the account, and fled the country. Nasaka, Canadian Nasaka. It is paradoxical that presidential directives frequently override the policies established by elected leadership, undermining council's oversight role and rendering the policy and legislative role ineffective. The situation is compounded by the fact that KCC as an entity is currently housed in the President's office, where it is being treated as an appendage of State House as opposed to an independent, self-accounting institution with an elected leadership that has got a social contract with the people of Kampala. I wish you take a note of that. This direct intervention in the state administration by the President is reminiscent of the archaic and repugnant practice in the olden days when we had the city and the country at large ruled by decrees, executive orders, and the economic policies. Challenge number 4. Mandate overlap by the ministers for Kampala and resident city commissioners. Proper management of the city has been greatly impaired by the incongruous practice of the ministers for Kampala and other CCs, whose statutory mandate is largely supervisory and guidance in nature, turning to day-to-day administration of the institution and micromanagement of the state affairs to the extent of arrogating themselves adjudicatory powers over petty local disputes ordinarily under the jurisdiction of local administrative units. Kanchi bagambe kino mva wano ku siteho naye nga wakyali ba minisita nti bakola emirimu gy'ekitongole. Minisita ali mu butale, minisita ali mu baboda, minisita ali mu batembeeyi, minisita atunda n'obusango bulina okuwozesebwa aba LC1 ne LC2 nga tukyalina ba minisita wano mu kibuga Kampala. Olugendo lukyali lunene olw'elected leadership okukola emirimu. Whereas the KCC Act designates the Lord Mayor as the overall political head of the city, successive ministers for Kampala have persistently and aggressively sought to assume that role, which has invited a relentless pushback from my office, thereby engendering a belligerent and antagonistic relationship between the two offices. In the aftermath of the botched impeachment, the then Minister for Kampala, Honorable Frank Tumwebazi, mooted a radical proposal to completely do away with the office of the Lord Mayor by, among other things, creating a governance board similar to those of other authorities, while his successor, the Honorable Betty Kamya had inserted the clause in the bill that amended the KCC Act in 2019, designating the Minister for Kampala as the overall political head of the city, which moves were successfully challenged. Impeachment olwaggwa bweti, Honorable Frank tumwebaze n'agamba kati tuleeta amendment yakugyawo council, yakugyawo authority, nti bateekewo board ng'eziri mu URA, board ng'eziri mu government agencies endala, National Water and Sewage Corp n'ewalala. Era batuukirirako eyali Prime Minister omugenzi Professor Apollo Nsibambi ne bamugamba ogenda okuba pioneer board chairman. Era bali bakifeesibisa nitukirwana. Kati we baleeta amendment mu 2018-19, Honorable Betty Kamya n'agamba ne kino ekifo kya political head tukijjewo, minisita y'aba abeera political head, olwo lutalo ne lukoya. Era ngenze lukyakoya. Number 10, academic qualifications for authority leaders. While the Kampala Capital City Act provides for a minimum of A-level certificate for the Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor, it imposes no such academic requirements for division mayors and councillors. This lacuna has triggered the agitations from sections of our people to amend the law and attach academic qualification to the city authority leadership positions commensurate to the required standards of capital city administration. Ekyo nja kukiwaako ebirowoozo eri gye nsembera mu recommendations, but it has been a problem. Kibadde ekizibu kinene. Era ekyo sikirumamu okubeera ne capital city ng'olina Lord Mayor nga bamugamba nti oteekeddwa okuba ne A-level oba oli ku level ya member of parliament ne deputy Lord Mayor, ate n'ogamba nti bakansala tekuli qualifications, nti ajja oba wa P1 oba teyayitako mu ssomero mwajja yingire bamulonda afuuke kansala owa capital city. Furthermore, under section 10 of the KCC Act, the Deputy Lord Mayor is required to possess a minimum of an A-level certificate. The challenge lies in the fact that the Deputy Lord Mayor must be appointed from amongst councillors who by law are not required to have any academic qualifications. KCCA risks having a vacant position for the Deputy Lord Mayor if none of the elected councillors meets the mandatory academic qualifications for the position of Deputy Lord Mayor. Conversely, the Lord Mayor will be compelled to appoint a Deputy Lord Mayor who may not be of his or her choice in the event that there is only one person who meets the required academic qualification from the elected councillors. Etteeka ligamba nti okufuna Deputy Lord Mayor alina okuba ne lisanyizo lya Lord Mayor nga alina A-level or its equivalent. Naye ng'omujja mu bakansala naye ate tekuli qualification ku bakansala. Ebbanga lyembadde wano mwakuba ekifaananyi singa balonda bakansala bonna nga tekuli alina A-level, deputy omulondo otya omujja mu bangi oba onoomujjawa, oba singa baleeta omu nga nze ndi opposition nga weenaaleyo nga kansala omu yalina qualifications gubulira okulonda, situgamba nti kibakutwanyuma okulonda weenaaleyo naye lwaki sironda Lord Deputy of my choice. So there is a problem with the law. Number 6, city identity crisis. Kampala faces a crisis of identity stemming from rapid unplanned growth spanning several decades. Transitioning from a small city meant for 300,000 people at independence to a current hodgepodge of a congested metropolis of over 1.7 million residents and over 4 million transient population, the city lacks a clear cohesive identity because of the chaotic mix of administrative, industrial, and commercial enclaves, giving it a slummy look. Though the city started as an administrative fort during the pre-colonial period, with the establishment of the Royal Palace at Kasuli Nabulagala by the Kabaka Mutesa I, it turned into a military garrison and a trading post in 1890 by British colonials led by Captain Dugal, and the birth of structured commerce occurring shortly after the turn of the 20th century with the arrival of the Indian merchant Alidina Visiram. Originally it was an administrative city, Kampala, during Mutesa I, with his seat at Nabulagala. Then when Alidina Visiram came here and established his shop, all of you have studied about the first businessman in Kampala was Aldina Visram, Kamas Preptin, and then he started taking that direction of a commercial city. Upon assuming the office, subsequently, for most of the colonial era, Entebbe served as the administrative capital, having originated as a garrison for Sajjera Depoto, while Kampala developed as the commercial hub. However, Kampala trajectory shifted in 1931 with the arrival of the Uganda Railway that sparked industrialization. Kampala then evolved into a dual commercial industrial city, while administrative power remained in Entebbe. Upon Uganda's independence in 1962, Kampala was established as a new capital city and administrative seat of the country, hence creating a hodgepodge of administrative, industrial, and commercial city. You've heard the genesis. Initially, administrative city under Mutesa I. When the colonialists came here, and the Indians came here, Kamas crept in. When we got Uganda Railway in Kampala here in 1931, then the industries started cropping up. So then you had a hodgepodge. You started having a hodgepodge. Administrative, commercial, and industrial. Upon assuming office as the pioneer road mayor, we embarked on a journey of developing Kampala as a purely commercial and lakefront city with a gigantic project of crafting and adopting a new structural plan, which is still work in progress. Suffice to note that steering the transformation caravan of Kampala to make it a functional metropolis befitting the Pearl of Africa without a clear city identity or direction has been such a Herculean task, only comparable to navigating a turbulent sea or ocean in a ship devoid of a compass. I will give the recommendations on that later. Inadequate funding. Inadequate funding for the development agenda in the city has remained a perpetual and an enigmatic challenge for several decades. During my first term, the institution of KCC rolled out the KCC Strategic Plan 2014-2019 under Section 46 of which was aligned to the National Vision 2040 and the Greater Kampala Metropolitan Area Development Framework 2040. And the theme was laying the foundation for the transformation of the city. This method funding for the implementation of the strategic plan for the period of the next 5 years was $1.5 billion US, approximately 5.1 trillion. Unfortunately, by close of the planning period, they had already disbursed 47%. That is 2.4 trillion. In September 2020, after the expiry of the first strategic plan, we prepared a new strategic plan for 2021-2025 and made the commitment that by June 2025, Kampala would be a well-planned, functional, and sustainable city that provides economic opportunities. The projected funding for implementation of the strategic plan was 7 trillion. However, it was revised along the way to 10.3 trillion due to fluctuating macroeconomic conditions. Unfortunately, or regrettably, by the end of the planning period, only 28% had been given to us, leading to a performance of only 35.5%. Now, this is now to the incoming leadership. They should take a note of this. On 30th September 2025, we prepared and launched a new 5-year strategic plan for 2026 to 2030. Their period of 5 years, we have already rolled out that plan. A good one, as the bedrock for the structural transformation of our city over the next 5 years. So they will have no problem. With the planning, I assure those who are going to take office, we have done the necessary planning. The structural plan is already there. With all what they want to put in place, everything is there. This rather grandiose and ambitious plan requires a projected resource envelope of 11.9 trillion, which translates into an annual funding requirement of approximately 2.4 trillion. Kanchibagambe plan ey'emyaka 5 2026 twagimaze era tugireseewo naye nga yeetaaga trillion 11 n'obuwumbi 9 11.9 trillion. Nga buli mwaka government erina okuwaayo 2.4 trillion. Unfortunately, for the first financial year of the implementation of this strategic plan, our budget was 916 billion, less than a trillion. Nga balina okutuwa 2.4 trillion, but 916. Even the Uganda shillings 1 trillion budget allocation for financial year 2026-2027 is significantly low compared to the projected target of Uganda shillings 2.4 trillion annually, and is likely to turn the aforesaid magnificent strategic plan into a fiasco. The plan is twakoze yeyo myaka etaano mu mwaka 2026-2027 budget twagimaze naye era twabadde tusente tumwamanta pamante government eyagamba ejjatuwa 2.4 trillion buli mwaka mu budget bataddemu 1 trillion. So buli ali eyo nga oli mukulembeze ogenda taking over manya budget gye mugenda okusangawo n'olutalo lwemulekedde. My leadership has persistently demanded that the central government limits at least 3% of the national budget to KCCA, given the fact that Kampala generates over 65% of the national GDP, but to now 2.8. This is now challenge number 8. I told you, njakuzisoma zino muguni nzimaleyo, MJS jakusoma mu detail, then ebirala njakubiyitambuyisa. KCCA is enjoined under the KCC Act to make its budgetary appropriations incorporating the urban division projections. In addition, pursuant to the provisions of Section 22, the city leadership is mandated to prepare the said budget with the technical assistance from management and submit the same to the Authority Council for consideration. However, the current program-based budgeting system, which was adopted by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, empowered the technical working groups to musically share the money amongst the different government agencies, contrary to the aforesaid provisions of the law. Over the years, the technical working groups have misaligned the KCCA budget by largely focusing on consumption and all current expenditure, neglecting the institution's strategic development needs, highlighted in our strategic plans, which has adversely affected our transformation journey. The appropriations made under the current budgeting system are almost cast in stone, with no room for adjustment by the political leadership, which oftentimes is required to just rubber stamp the same. The institution budget is persistently choked by huge administrative costs, salaries, capacity building, debt servicing, litigation costs, etc., as indicated in the allocation for the current 2 financial years as yonder. Previously, the situation had been compounded by intermittent garnishing orders of freezing KCC accounts on account of uncleared debts or liabilities, though the situation has already slightly improved. Maybe the ED has helped a little to improve on the situation, but we have suffered these problems perpetually. You can see, I have put here this budget specifically for people to appreciate. Njakubasaba kitaddewo wano nti largely tulina consumption budget and there has been a problem. Consumption budget nga development budget ebisinga birimu unfunded priorities. Working groups ezikolebwa Ministry of Finance njagala okubaga nga temutuyambye mutupotogedde kubanga allocations zaffe mbadde temuzikola. High level of informality. I may not go into detail. This is quite detailed, but just a few excerpts. The high level of informality in Kampala is a defining character covering everything from construction, business, labor market, sanitation, settlement, housing to transport. While Kampala is slightly better than other cities in the country in terms of structured employment, informality still dominates, with approximately 73% of its workforce engaged in informal employment. Lacking formal worker spaces and support, Kampala's urban poor have turned into unregulated street vending, transport, among other informal. Roughly 60% of Kampala's population lives in informal settlements or slums, which are widely dispersed rather than concentrated in one area. By 2017, it was estimated that 50% of the population in the Greater Kampala metropolitan lives in slum settlements, predominantly near fragile ecosystems such as wetlands that have been identified for upgrading. However, there are no serious or significant macroeconomic interventions from the central government to reverse the trend. And the situation is not helped because of, on account of the continuous influx of a myriad of refugees from as far as Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, DRC, who settle in all these slums. Mwina mubala ekibuga ng'ogyeko abafu abajja, kati Eritrea bajja, Abasomali bajja, Abakongo bajja, gende Kabalagala ndowooza capital city yasima, oyinza okulowooza olyasimala oluluddawa ekibuga kijjudde. So, si kigenze mu detail, naye ebiri South Africa xenophobia n'ebirala tubyeraliikirira. Naye informality is still a problem. Number 10, impunity by elite cartels. Fierce and intermittent run-ins with the marauding elite cartels in the city will always remain a key defining feature of my 15-year journey at State Hall. These marauding cartels are a huge threat to the public good, always on rampage to pass up public land and assets to themselves, including green spaces, educational institutions, health facilities, playgrounds, markets, roads, wetlands, and of late, drainage channels like a natural channel. It is by the grace of the Lord that I survived death on several occasions in nerve-wracking battles over public assets like Nakasero Market, Pakayadi Market, City Abattoir, Kiseka Market, Nachivo Settlement, Bati Valley Primary School, Nkuruma Health Center, Nachivo Channel. Majority of these mafias and cartels operate primarily through state protection, institutional manipulation, and false narratives of development, blackmail, and outright lethal threats. However, despite the attempts to demonize and vilify me as being belligerent and anti-development, my resolve has remained unshaken up to this very moment, and I am quite confident posterity will judge me fairly. Nebaza omutonzi, nebaza Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Olwaleero 11 omwezi ogwokutaano omwaka 2026 nsuubira nja kufuluma wano nga ndi mulamu. Nali nakola dde ekiraamo kyange nga mmanyi abasajja bagenda kunyiza omusu nti siva mu State Hall wano nga ndi mulamu. Nali mmanyi bajja kunziza ewaffe e Kabungo nga ndi maiti mu State Hall. Nendowooza nga bazisizako emyaka 15 nempona nakasera awo baali banzitidde. Waliwo agasajja gakawula agaali ganzitidde wansi wali ku paaka yali agaali gakulembeddwa sopi nengayitako. Abasajja agaali ganzitidde mu lufula abaali badde banzitidde buli wamu. Nebaza omutonzi nti gagatezi nga wonye nga mafiya nga wonye. By the time I assumed office, City Hall carried an ignominious title of a den of thieves. Throughout my tenure, I have spared no effort in institutionalizing mechanisms of guaranteeing accountable governance and administration to stamp out this cancer, which is systemic and pervasive in all government agencies. Notwithstanding the fact that the Corruption Perception Index in KCCA slightly improved in recent times compared to the ugly image of the defunct KCC. This vice has regrettably inured and affected the state transformation caravan. The most egregious corruption practices included, I will cite this. Number 1, the 43 billion USAF market transaction, 2013-14. Nze Nkukuluma, obumbi 43 bwabbibwa ku USAF ku bibaawo ebiri awo. Ekyo ngenze ekibagamba, ngenda naye obumbi 43 mwabubba, abaabubba bakimanyi. And the botched There was also $100 million Kisenyi land purchase January 2023 eno ya Bosco Mwonge mbu eka 10 aziguza KCCA milioni 10 eza $, buli eka milioni 10. Bosco Mwonge ngenze naye omunyago togutujja kusuuziza ngenze okusuuziza kuno zino naze musuuza. Inflated the cost of civil works. There is also this Kitezi Way Bridges. Kitezi Way Bridges, Madam Ibi and the team abasigadde. Abantu ne bajja kula ebyuma okuva ekitezi ne bagenda ne babitunda Rwanda n'amanya gamanyiddwa. Ne tugenda mu audit n'ekolebwa. Report weziri Kitezi Way Bridge. The abhorrent illegal practice of land conversion into private property and the return of fraudulent transactions involving fictitious litigation and other shady deals, leading to hemorrhage of resources and freezing of our accounts. Ngenze nkukuluma ku nsonga y'omwala gw'Nakivubo. Omusajja Amisi Kiggundu ne banne eka 56 nazetwala n'ateekako akayumba. Kambabuulire kino njagala kino kibategeeza kibayita kiyosiki si kwe kuba nti kyekintu ekyembaawo nti akayumba katono kabibaawo. Ekiyitibwa kiyosiki ekintu kyonna ekitali ku pulaani n'okuba kukalina bunene kutya. Amisi Kiggundu yazimba ka kiyosiki ku mwala gw'Nakivubo. Bwe tuba tumenya ku kiyosiki ka Amisi Kiggundu n'abalya ssente mu kakiyosiki ako bakangavulwe. Ngenze naye abazirya ku mwala gw'Nakivubo, kiyosiki y'omwala gw'Nakivubo muli badi okalyadda kakola ki kadadda nze nkute mu lwange ngenda naye okalyadda. According to Auditor General reports, KCC has faced consistent criticism over its financial management, characterized by a pattern of poor audit opinions and financial irregularities since its inception in 2011. Save for only one financial year, 2013-2014, KCC has since 2011 been receiving qualified audit opinions up to 2024, indicating persistent financial reporting deficiencies, procurement fraud and mismanagement, and so on and so forth. The IGG reports for 2023-2024 singled out KCC as one of the most corrupt local government authorities and the third most corrupt entity in the country in their previous biannual reports to Parliament. The IGG further undertook to establish a special unit to handle improprieties and corruption. Regrettably, since inception, KCC has seen very few individuals arrested or prosecuted for abuse of office, embezzlement, or corruption, and no single trial and conviction by the court. Perpetrators often benefit from strong state protection and patronage from a systemic cartel. Eno njagala jikubira bwenti mbagambe IGG enkyanekula tafulumya report ng'agamba KCCA tukwata kyakubiri ng'ekitongole nti KCCA ekwata kyakubiri mu kulya enguzi. Okujjako rate wabaddewo improvement nga bwe mbagambye ku corruption index, perception index. Naye for the last 15 years tubadde tuli waggulu. Naye ate kikwewunyisa nti abakangavu tuwulira nti onakangavuddwa onaateekeddwa mu mbuga z'amateeka era mu history y'ebyafaayo mu byafaayo by'ekitongole ndi ogu mu KCC gwe bakateekako akakiiko akaba mugemereire tribunal mu 2013 nga bwe bagambye. Mbuuza oba tubadde nti ekitongole kifumbekeddemu enguzi abalala nga tebateekebwako bukiiko bubanoonyerezaako lwaki tebakangavulwa? Lwaki tebakwatako nabo be bagenda ku anti-corruption court? Waliyo State House anti-corruption unit, lwaki tebakwatako? Nze banteekako akakiiko ne banfulumyako ne report. Ekyo kibalekedde ngende ewaffe. Disconnect with the people. Disconnect with the people. Disconnect with the people. Long before its transition from the defunct KCC, Kampala's city administration has been widely perceived as a tool of oppression and persecution rather than service delivery. My leadership has persistently maintained that while enforcing the trade regulations is essential, it is imperative that we execute it lawfully and with a human face. As always emphasized, mindset change is critical and should be directed towards a paradigm shift or transformation of the institution from being mere regulators and enforcers of godliness to facilitators and enablers of economic growth and development. I've always guided that the institution of KCC should pursue the long-term strategy of integrating the urban poor into a structured economy. We must guard against high-handedness and wanton persecution of the indigents struggling to make a living within the informal sector. Trade order is not a function of brutality. It is inimical to genuine development for an institution to continue unleashing terror against street vendors, border borders, taxi operators, instead of organizing them in accordance with the existing law. Gena nakyo ngenda naye ekitongole ekifaananyi kyakyo nti kikola kitulugunya. Ekifaananyi ekyo tulwanya okukikyusa, ebisigadde abanaddako babitambuza. Ekisembayo, want of collaborative mechanisms with the neighboring local authorities. These are the 13 challenges that I identified. You can add more, but these are the most critical ones. Despite frequent references to the metropolitan area, even by the Ministry of Kampala, no formal legal framework exists to establish and operationalize it. Consequently, this metropolitan entity is functionally non-existent. The Ministry of Kampala primarily covers KCCA, whereas the rest of the greater metropolitan area is handled by the Ministry of Local Governments. While the amended KCCA mandates the Ministry of Kampala to designate planning across the greater Kampala area, the Ministry lacks direct jurisdiction over neighboring local government entities outside the state limits. Despite their importance, initiatives like WASH and GKMA lack clear implementation frameworks and suffer ambiguous implementation structure. Kino okutereera structures ezo okubaawo is a metropolitan area. Now, this area of challenges, I told you I will not waste a lot of time. Our achievements. I am just going to give highlights, and go to the conclusion and call it a day. They are quite detailed. The rest you read for yourself. It's quite a lot. The achievements, what we have covered in all these areas. But just highlights. Number one achievement of areas for the last 15 years, steadfast leadership, being Kampala's fortress of rectitude. Number one. Notwithstanding the challenges, I'm thrilled to note that my leadership has resolved to uphold the people's sovereign authority, and I have taken decisive steps to solidify a clear and actionable vision for the city as here, and I've offered a dexterous and dignified personality that is not only an embodiment of the will and aspirations of the people of Kampala, but also a proven passion against oppression and repression, against corruption, against abuse of public resources, against alienation of public assets, against mafias, against the cartels, against eviction of the urban poor, against bad governance, against all forms of malfeasance and injustices. Say it. If it is an injustice, look what has been there to deal with it. Ekyo nja kukyenyumyako abanjagala n'abatanjagala bonna bakkiriza nti bwe kiba kituuse
offeringa bukulembeze obuli ku mulamwa obulemerako obw'amazima obw'obwenkanya obuli mu nsonga z'omuntu wa bulijjo obwebwerufu Lukwago abadde number 1 mu ekyo. Number 2 in that category, successfully building the institution of KCCA and optimizing its functionality in a rather hostile political environment and legal ambiguities, streamlining the operations of the city executive, authority council, and management, as well as restricting the overbearing influence of the Ministry of Kampala. This has enabled us to handle a huge volume of authority business, which has given city. I give credit, Madam Speaker, and all of you, the authority councillors. But now, ngezezaako mu mbeera enzibu okuzimba ekitongole kye bayita KCCA. Waliwo akaseera wano nga council teziza kutuula nga tuyinza kutuwali executive tewali kino naye kakati olabye executive weeri council etuula statutory bodies weeziri zino ne ziri mu bugubi obw'ekitalo. Waliwo nga council tesobola kutuula nti idi atudde ali awo nti waliwo speaker atudde Lord Mayor aliwo nono atuwa omulimu ogwo ng'okoze ogw'okuzimba institution ya KCCA. Era wano mwenjogeredde nti n'omulimu of restricting the overbearing influence of the Ministry of Kampala munansonyiwa mulimu abalowooza nti ntalo naye bwe mbadde ngamba nti Lukwago engabo ya Kampala era mbadde engabo ya kitongole nakyo mbadde kijinji eri baminisita abo obutaleeta mbeera yakulemesa kitongole kola mirimu gyakyo. Idi alina emirimu gye, kanso erina emirimu gyayo, Lord Mayor alina egigye, amagombolola galina minisita jja buli wamu. Nze mbadde nteekawo omugongo nengamba gwe minisita olimba ddo oyise woolina okoma tukkiriza olina obuyinza obusupervisinga tukkiriza olina veto power naye tujja kulemesa bakansala kukola mirimu gyabwe, tujja kulemesa bameeya kukola mirimu gyabwe, tujja kulemesa idi kukola mirimu gyabwe, tujja kulemesa speaker kukola mirimu. Mwenna endowooza temukikkiriza. Remaining a towering moral campus and uncompromising custodian and embodiment of the people's trust, will and aspiration, and so on and so forth. Now, I will just proceed now to number 2 and give some highlights. Number 2, achievement number 2, robust accountability mechanisms and protection of public assets. Driven by the principle of accountability and radical transparency, I have fostered a culture of radical openness, ethical governance, and strict fiscal integrity. As the primary custodian of public resources, my enduring commitment has always focused on protection and safeguarding valuable assets for the greater common good. I have jealously safeguarded the ethos of compliance with organizational policies, operational systems, and procedural rigor to protect the sanctity of public funds and ensure optimal return on taxpayers' investments. On numerous occasions, provided guidance and delivered solemn pronouncements on broader spectrum of governance and administrative lapses and transgressions within the city. These have encompassed rampant misappropriation and abuse of public resources. Consistently and persistently pursued intervention